In the quiet morning hours of July 26, 2019, the tranquility of a homestead neighborhood in Florida was shattered by a series of gunshots. The victim, 21-year-old Winnie Daniela Mendoza, lay lifeless in the driveway of her home, a place that should have been her sanctuary. The alleged perpetrator? Her 44-year-old uncle by marriage, Stephen Fraser Myers. Mendoza was a young woman with aspirations of becoming a nurse, diligently working as a pharmacy assistant to support her dreams. Her life was a blend of hard work and dedication, painting the picture of a promising future. Myers, married to Mendoza's aunt, was a familiar figure within the family. To outsiders, he was a devoted husband and father, leading a seemingly ordinary life. On that fateful morning, as Mendoza returned home, Myers confronted her in the driveway. An argument erupted, culminating in Myers allegedly shooting Mendoza multiple times before fleeing the scene. The aftermath revealed a shocking twist. Myers confessed to authorities that he and Mendoza had been involved in a clandestine relationship for 2 years. This revelation sent shockwaves through the community, leaving many grappling with the complexities of the situation. Family members and friends were left in disbelief. Mendoza's mother expressed profound grief, stating, "We are living a horrible nightmare." Friends and co-workers remembered Mendoza as a kind and dedicated individual, with some questioning the validity of Myers' claims about the affair. Myers was subsequently arrested and charged with second-degree murder. The case brought to light the devastating consequences of hidden relationships and the tragic impact they can have on families and communities. Winnie Daniela Mendoza was just 21 years old. A young woman raised in Miami-Dade County, Florida, with a calm demeanor and a quiet determination. She was known for her work ethic, her love for her family, and her dream of becoming a nurse. She was studying and working part-time as a pharmacy assistant, steadily building a life that showed promise. Her uncle, Angel Calderon, described her as someone who avoided distractions, focused on school, work, and family. She wasn't the kind of person you'd expect to make headlines. But on the morning of July 26, 2019, headlines were exactly where her name would appear. Winnie was found in the driveway of her family's home on Southwest 280th Street near 139th Avenue. Shot multiple times. The scene was chaotic, police lights flashing, crime scene tape stretching across the quiet residential block. Neighbors stood outside in disbelief, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Some thought it was a robbery gone wrong. Others assumed the shooter was a stranger. But nothing made sense. Nothing added up. The horror wasn't just in the fact that she had been gunned down steps away from her front door. It was who the police would later say pulled the trigger. Stephen Fraser Myers. 44 years old. Married to Winnie's aunt. A man who, until that moment, had been just another familiar face at family gatherings. A husband. A father. He had no history of violence. No prior arrest. Just a normal man with a regular job and a family of his own. When detectives first looked into the case, there was no clear motive. No sign of forced entry. No stolen belongings. No enemies that Winnie had mentioned to anyone. But what baffled them most was that Stephen Myers had been at the scene, and then, shortly after, returned to his own home and confessed to his wife, Winnie's aunt, that he had killed her niece. Why would a man murder someone so close to him? Why would he take the life of a 21-year-old woman, barely an adult, who trusted him? There was only one answer. But no one could explain why Stephen Myers would be near her house that morning, until police uncovered a dark truth. Winnie Daniela Mendoza was a 21-year-old woman living in Miami-Dade County, Florida. She worked as a pharmacy assistant and was studying to become a nurse. Family members described Winnie as a dedicated individual who focused on her studies and work. Her uncle, Angel Calderon, noted that she avoided distractions and was committed to her goals. Winnie's routine was straightforward, balancing her job at a local pharmacy with her nursing studies. She was known for her quiet determination and strong work ethic. Her mother expressed profound grief over the loss, stating, we are living a horrible nightmare. Winnie's life was characterized by her commitment to her family and her aspirations in the medical field. Her untimely death left a void in the lives of those who knew her. On the morning of July 26, 2019, the sun rose over Miami-Dade County, casting its warm glow on the quiet neighborhood where 21-year-old Winnie Mendoza lived. Winnie had spent the previous night away from home, and as she drove back that morning, she was unaware that someone was watching her every move. Stephen Fraser Myers, her 44-year-old uncle by marriage, had been waiting. According to police reports, he had been tracking her whereabouts, consumed by a need to know where she had been. As Winnie approached her residence, Myers followed closely behind in his truck. As Winnie pulled into the driveway and stepped out of her car, Myers confronted her. Witnesses later reported hearing a heated argument between the two. Myers demanded to know about her whereabouts the previous night, his voice tinged with jealousy and anger. The confrontation escalated rapidly. In a fit of rage, Myers drew a firearm and shot Winnie multiple times in the torso. The sharp cracks of gunfire shattered the morning calm, drawing the attention of neighbors and passers-by. Emergency services were called, but by the time they arrived, Winnie was already dead, her lifeless body lying in the driveway of her family home. After the shooting, Myers fled the scene, leaving a community in shock and a family in mourning. He drove to his own home, where he confessed to his wife, Winnie's aunt, that he had just killed her niece. This chilling admission would soon unravel a web of secrets and lies that no one had suspected. But when Myers got home, what he confessed to his wife changed everything. After the tragic events of that morning, Stephen Fraser Myers returned to his residence. His wife, Luisa Amanda Mendoza, was home when he arrived. With a demeanor that belied the gravity of his actions, Myers confessed to her that he had just shot and killed her niece, Winnie Daniela Mendoza. The weight of his admission prompted immediate action. Law enforcement was alerted, and it wasn't long before officers located Myers. Upon being taken into custody, he provided detectives with a full, recorded confession, detailing the events that led to the fatal confrontation. During his confession, Myers revealed a startling secret: he and Winnie had been engaged in a clandestine sexual relationship for approximately 2 years. This disclosure added a complex layer to the already tragic narrative, suggesting that the motive behind the shooting was deeply personal. For Winnie's family, the revelation was devastating. They had initially grappled with the shock of her sudden death, but the emerging details painted a picture of betrayal that was almost too painful to comprehend. The notion that a trusted family member could be involved in such a relationship, let alone commit such a heinous act, was beyond their understanding. Her mother, Yesenia Mendoza, encapsulated the family's anguish, stating, "We are living a horrible nightmare." As the community absorbed the shocking details, questions arose about the nature of the relationship and the events that culminated in such a tragic outcome. The betrayal felt by the family was profound, as they struggled to reconcile the image of the man they knew with the actions he confessed. Winnie Mendoza's murder shocked her family. But it was what came after, the confession, the secret, that shook them to their core. Stephen Fraser Myers, 44 years old, was more than just Winnie's uncle by marriage. He was a familiar presence at family gatherings, cookouts, birthdays, someone trusted, someone accepted. No one suspected that, for nearly 2 years, Myers had been involved in a sexual relationship with Winnie, who was barely 19 when it began. He admitted this to police shortly after his arrest, in a confession that stunned even seasoned detectives. But how could this happen, and how did no one see it? According to the Miami-Dade police report, Myers said the relationship had been consensual. But the age gap, more than 2 decades, and the family connection raised serious doubts. At 19, Winnie was still transitioning out of adolescence, building her independence. Myers was a middle-aged man with a wife and adult responsibilities. This wasn't just about age. It was about control. About power. Was Winnie coerced into silence? Groomed over time? Did she feel like she had a choice? Those closest to her say nothing seemed out of the ordinary. She never spoke about a relationship with her uncle, never hinted at anything inappropriate. Friends and family described her as quiet, focused, and extremely private. It's possible she was scared. Or maybe ashamed. Or maybe she didn't know how to get out. The dynamic between them wasn't balanced, it never could be. Myers held the upper hand in nearly every way. He was older. He was family. He had the freedom to come and go without suspicion. And if Winnie tried to end things, would anyone believe her? Would anyone even understand? As the investigation unfolded, many began to ask the same question: was Winnie truly in a relationship with Myers, or was she in a dangerous situation she didn't know how to escape? Even more disturbing, Myers told detectives he had become jealous the night before the murder. He had driven past her house and seen another car in the driveway. That small act, something that had nothing to do with him, sparked the rage that ended Winnie's life. His jealousy wasn't just emotional, it was obsessive, possessive, and ultimately, fatal. What began as a secret became a motive. And what Myers framed as love turned out to be anything but. Do you think this was a consensual relationship, or something far more dangerous that had been hiding in plain sight all along? Let me know in the comments. The death of Winnie Mendoza didn't just break a family. It fractured a community. News of the shooting spread quickly across Miami-Dade County. At first, the headlines were incomprehensible: young woman gunned down in driveway. But as the details came into focus, the shock only deepened. Her killer wasn't a stranger. He wasn't a jealous boyfriend. He was her uncle. The husband of her own aunt. For her mother, Yesenia Mendoza, the grief was unbearable. "She was my only daughter," she told reporters in a breaking voice. "We are living a horrible nightmare. Winnie was supposed to be safe with family. She wasn't supposed to be looking over her shoulder, afraid of someone who'd watched her grow up." Her mother described her as kind, responsible, and private, a young woman who never brought trouble to anyone. She had dreams of becoming a nurse. She worked hard, stayed out of drama, and loved her family deeply. What she kept hidden would ultimately cost her life. And for her aunt, Luisa Amanda Mendoza, the pain was more complicated, more twisted. Her husband had just confessed to murdering her niece. Her worlds had collided in the worst possible way. The man she shared a home with was capable of this. Luisa never spoke publicly about the aftermath. But people close to her described her as shattered. Friends said she barely ate, barely spoke. Her marriage was over. Her family was broken. And the guilt, the unrelenting guilt, hung in the air, even though she had no part in the crime. The community, meanwhile, reacted with disbelief. Winnie had worked at a local pharmacy, where customers remembered her as polite and always willing to help. A candlelight vigil was organized within days. Dozens gathered with photographs, signs, and handwritten notes. A sea of candles flickered under the Florida dusk as neighbors, classmates, and friends stood together in silence. One sign read, "Justice for Winnie. She deserved better." Another simply said, "You are not forgotten." The heartbreak ran deep. People didn't just mourn her, they questioned everything. How could this happen? How did no one know? Was there something they missed? Police presence in the neighborhood increased. Parents looked at their daughters differently. Families drew closer. The illusion of safety had been shattered, not by some unknown threat, but by someone within the circle of trust. Winnie's death became a symbol, not only of a life stolen but of the hidden dangers that can lurk behind familiar smiles. She was mourned not just as a victim of violence, but as a young woman whose voice may have been lost long before the gunshots ever rang out. The courtroom is a place where facts are laid bare. Where emotions must be restrained, and justice, however delayed or imperfect, is pursued. But in the case of Stephen Fraser Myers, the facts weren't in question. He had already confessed. Within hours of gunning down his 21-year-old niece, Winnie Mendoza, Myers returned home and told his wife, Winnie's aunt, what he had done. Police were called. He was taken into custody without resistance. And when detectives sat him down in an interrogation room, he said the words no one expected to hear. He admitted it. All of it. That he had been in a 2-year sexual relationship with Winnie. That he had ended it. That he had feared she might expose him. And that he shot her, multiple times, to make sure she never would. To prosecutors in Miami-Dade County, the case seemed straightforward. A taped confession. A recovered weapon. Forensic evidence. Motive. Stephen Myers was charged with second-degree murder, a classification under Florida law for killings that are intentional but not premeditated. But almost immediately, questions surfaced: was this really second degree? Or did it go deeper? The legal process began with quiet but deliberate motions. Myers' attorney appeared at bond hearings and early procedural conferences. There was no request for bail. No attempt to minimize the charges. The defense understood what they were up against. The public confession meant that a trial would be less about what happened and more about why, and how the law should interpret it. Still, the stakes couldn't have been higher. If Myers were convicted of second-degree murder, he faced the possibility of life in prison, but with some eligibility for parole depending on sentencing factors. First-degree murder, however, was a different story. Under Florida law, that meant life without parole, or even the death penalty, if prosecutors chose to pursue it. So the question became, did Stephen Myers plan to kill Winnie Mendoza? The prosecution painted a chilling narrative. They argued that Myers had become entangled in an illicit relationship with someone much younger, a woman still discovering her place in the world. When the relationship soured, he felt threatened. Exposure could mean the collapse of his marriage, criminal charges, and complete social ruin. So, they argued, he chose silence. Finality. They pointed to the fact that Myers followed Winnie home that morning. That he waited until she arrived. The neighbors heard an argument, shouting, tension. And then, gunshots. He didn't lash out in a moment of rage, the prosecution said. He came there with a gun. He came with the intent to make sure Winnie would never speak of their relationship again. But the defense countered. They argued that Myers had no prior criminal history. That his decision, while devastating, was not calculated. It was spontaneous. Emotional. Born of panic. A moment of collapse, not cold-blooded planning. This back and forth, between impulse and intent, would shape the trajectory of the case. Prosecutors considered elevating the charge to first-degree murder. But doing so would mean proving premeditation, an often difficult, murky legal threshold. Did he bring the weapon with the intent to kill? Or was it brought in fear, in self-defense, in confusion? Those distinctions mattered. They could change the outcome entirely. And behind closed doors, conversations began about a possible plea deal. A guilty plea in exchange for a life sentence, perhaps avoiding the cost and trauma of a public trial. For the Mendoza family, however, no outcome could truly deliver justice. The wounds were too deep. The betrayal is too personal. In court filings and legal motions, Myers' defense team quietly explored every avenue. But the facts remained: a young woman was dead. And the man who killed her had told the world why. The legal battle was not just about the length of a prison sentence. It was about what this crime meant. What kind of man Stephen Myers really was. And whether justice, in any form, could truly be served for the life of Winnie Mendoza. Stephen Fraser Myers. 44 years old. A husband. A father. A trusted member of his extended family. To those around him, Stephen seemed ordinary. Steady. Predictable. He was married to Winnie Mendoza's aunt and had been a fixture in the family for years. There were birthday parties. Holiday dinners. Photographs where he stood smiling just feet away from the young woman he would one day murder. But the question remains, who was Stephen Myers beneath the surface? How does a man, any man, cross that line? From uncle, to killer. Investigators began peeling back layers. They combed through his background, looking for clues. No history of violent crime. No past accusations. He held steady employment. He had no known ties to drugs or organized crime. But something was off. Something had been wrong for a long time. In interviews with family, a pattern began to emerge. Myers had always been a little too friendly with Winnie. Always offering to drive her places. Buying her small gifts. Sometimes checking in on her, even when there was no reason to. At first, it seemed harmless. Maybe even generous. But in hindsight, those small gestures were early red flags. Experts in forensic psychology often describe this kind of behavior as grooming, a slow, calculated process in which a perpetrator builds trust, tests boundaries, and gradually exerts influence over someone younger or more vulnerable. Stephen Myers wasn't just Winnie's uncle by marriage. He was nearly twice her age. He held emotional and familial authority. That kind of power imbalance isn't always visible. But when it exists, it can create a dynamic where consent becomes blurred. Where silence becomes expected. Where fear replaces freedom. So what drove him? Lust? Control? The fear of being exposed? Dr. Rachel Goldstein, a clinical forensic psychologist not involved with the case, explains. When we look at cases involving familial sexual abuse, we often see a profile of entitlement and secrecy. The offender convinces themselves they're not doing harm, that they're in control. But when that illusion begins to collapse, when the victim begins to speak out or pull away, that's when things can turn violent. According to his confession, Myers had been involved with Winnie for nearly 2 years. That timeline suggests that he initiated the relationship when she was around 19. Legally, she was an adult. But emotionally? Developmentally? That's where the imbalance becomes undeniable. And when she tried to end it, when she threatened to tell someone, Myers panicked. Was it shameful? Was it rage? Or was it the cold, calculating decision of a man who knew that exposure would destroy everything, his marriage, his reputation, his freedom? The prosecution believed it was the latter. That Myers drove to her home not to talk, but to silence. That he brought the weapon. That he waited. That he knew what he was doing. But even now, there are those who ask, did he snap in a moment of emotional collapse, or was this something darker? Something premeditated? Understanding Stephen Myers means confronting a chilling reality. Sometimes, the most dangerous people are the ones who seem the most familiar. The ones already inside your home. The ones you've already learned to trust. And in the end, it wasn't a stranger who took Winnie Mendoza's life. It was someone who called her family. Do you think Stephen Myers acted out of uncontrollable emotion, or was this a deliberate execution of control? A calculated crime? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. The courtroom fell silent as Stephen Fraser Myers stood before the judge. The words spoken during his sentencing, final and definitive, would bring a certain closure to the story, but it wouldn't bring Winnie Mendoza back. No number of years behind bars could undo the devastation he had caused. On January 22, 2020, Myers was sentenced to life in prison for the murder of his niece. No parole. His actions, his confession, the cold manner in which he ended Winnie's life, all played a role in the judge's decision. In that moment, Myers' fate was sealed. But for Winnie's family, no sentence would ever be enough. For her mother, the loss was a hole that could never be filled. A daughter gone too soon. A future erased. The pain was not only for what was lost, but for the cruel way in which it was taken, by someone who was supposed to love and protect her. Winnie's aunt, Myers' wife, was left shattered, caught between loyalty to her husband and grief over the life of the young woman who had once been part of their family. The betrayal she felt was unimaginable. How could she reconcile the man she had known for years with the monster who had taken the life of her niece? This is the legacy of hidden abuse, the toll it takes on everyone involved, whether or not they are directly complicit. As for the community, the ripple effects of the crime spread far and wide. Friends, colleagues, and acquaintances of both Winnie and Stephen Myers were left stunned. Many spoke of how they never suspected anything out of the ordinary, how the horrors of grooming and manipulation can remain hidden under the guise of normalcy. The facade that Myers had carefully constructed over the years crumbled away, revealing a darkness no one had seen coming. Winnie Mendoza's life was taken before it could truly begin. At just 21, she was pursuing her dreams of becoming a nurse, eager to help others, and full of promise. She had a future filled with opportunity, love, and growth. But in one tragic moment, it was all taken from her. What could she have accomplished? What could her life have become if she had been allowed to live freely and fully? Her death serves as a tragic reminder of how dangerous secrets can be, how hidden abuse can quietly destroy lives. It also underscores the importance of speaking out, of confronting uncomfortable truths before they spiral out of control. Winnie's story, now immortalized through her tragic end, should stand as a testament to the importance of vigilance and awareness. The signs of abuse, manipulation, and control are not always obvious. They hide in plain sight, lurking in spaces where trust should be the foundation. But trust can be shattered in an instant, and the consequences can be devastating. The legacy of Winnie Mendoza is not one of silence, but one of strength, of the strength it takes for a family to endure such unimaginable pain. Her memory lives on in the lessons learned from her life and death. In closing, we must reflect on what we can do as a society to prevent such tragedies from happening again. To give victims the voice they need to speak their truth. To educate the world on the dangers of hidden abuse. Winnie Mendoza's story may have ended too soon. But her impact can be felt, in every conversation, every raised voice, and every attempt to prevent the next tragedy. As we approach the conclusion of this tragic tale, lingering questions persist. Were there signs, subtle hints, that something was amiss? Did anyone suspect the dark secret lurking within this family? Family members and friends of Winnie Mendoza were stunned by the revelation of her relationship with Stephen Myers. Her uncle, Adrian Calderon, expressed his disbelief, stating, "We feel really bad right now. We feel really bad about what happened. She was a very good person. I don't know why anyone would have done this." The community's reaction mirrored this shock. Mendoza's friends remembered her as, just overall a sweet and beautiful person, with a heart of gold, voicing skepticism about Myers' claims regarding their affair. One friend remarked, "We just can't believe what he is saying about the affair. There is more to this story. There has to be." But perhaps the most chilling aspect lies in the messages discovered by authorities. Police found communications suggesting that Stephen Myers had been monitoring Mendoza's activities, indicating a level of obsession and control that had escalated over time. These findings paint a picture of a man who, despite his outward normalcy, harbored dark intentions. The facade of a loving family member concealed a predator who meticulously planned his actions, culminating in the tragic death of a young woman with a promising future. Given the evidence uncovered, do you believe Stephen Myers acted alone, or was there a larger conspiracy at play? Share your thoughts in the comments. As we close this tragic chapter, we are left to grapple with the complex, painful reality of what happened to Winnie Mendoza. A young woman with so much potential, whose life was violently taken by someone she trusted, someone who should have been there to protect her. But in the wake of her death, we are reminded of something even more unsettling. Sometimes, the most dangerous people are the ones closest to us. They are the ones who know our vulnerabilities, our weaknesses, and our deepest secrets. Trust, family, and love, these are the cornerstones of our most personal relationships. But behind closed doors, those very same bonds can be manipulated, twisted, and used for control, deception, and destruction. The betrayal that Winnie experienced wasn't just from a stranger, it came from someone who had been trusted by her family, someone who was supposed to be safe. This story is a stark reminder of the hidden dangers lurking in even the most familiar spaces. We may think we know the people around us, but as this case shows, appearances can be deceiving. Behind the facade of normalcy, there can be a much darker reality. A reality that, if left unchecked, can have tragic consequences. For those who loved Winnie, the pain is unbearable. A promising life cut short. A future that will never be realized. And for the rest of us, the story forces us to reconsider how we view the people in our lives. How much do we really know? How much of ourselves are we giving away to others without even realizing the risks? Sometimes the people we trust most are the ones hiding the darkest secrets. This case underscores the importance of vigilance, of trust but with caution, and of listening to the silent signals that can sometimes indicate that something is wrong. It teaches us to look beyond the surface and to question the relationships that shape our world. While Winnie's life was taken too soon, her story serves as a crucial lesson. In remembering her, we must remain vigilant, aware, and above all, compassionate for those who may be suffering in silence. Now that you've heard the full story, we want to hear from you. What do you think really happened between Winnie and Stephen? Was it a crime of passion, or was there something even darker at play? Drop your thoughts and theories in the comments below. We love hearing what you think, and your theories could be featured in our next video. If this case shocked you, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications. That way, you won't miss out on any of our future true crime investigations. Tomorrow, we'll bring you another chilling story, one that will keep you up at night, wondering how such darkness could exist right under our noses. Trust us, you won't want to miss it. Thank you for watching, and until next time, stay safe, stay vigilant, and keep questioning the world around you.